It is Monday again at time of filming, and I can't believe how quickly the weeks are disappearing this year. It's absolutely crazy. We're already kind of coming towards the end of summer. I don't know where the time's going, it's absolutely mad, but here we are. We're at a new week, and today I'm going to be thinking of some new ideas for videos to be sharing with you this week, so I'm looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to what your reactions will be. It's a bit gloomy outside today here in the UK, so I'm struggling a little bit for light in the studio. I hope the visuals are looking okay. And also, I hope that you all had a great weekend. It was really nice for me to have a relax this weekend, staying at home, because you may remember me saying that the previous weekend was just really hectic and I was away all weekend. So yeah, it was great to chill this weekend. And on the topic of weekends, did you guys get up to anything interesting? I'd love to hear it in the comments below. I actually went ahead and bought some books, which I've got here. Now, I'm pretty terrible at reading. I try and force myself to read because I do enjoy it when I finish the books, but the actual act of reading I find quite frustrating sometimes. But these are books which I actually genuinely want to read, and that hasn't been the case for a long time. I usually just kind of pick up a book and force myself to read it, but these two which I've got, I really want to read. So I bought the book for the film No Country for Old Men. If you guys have seen that, that's one of my favourite all-time films. It's a Coen Brothers film. If you haven't seen it and you like atmospheric films, it's a really good film, but this is the book for it, Cormac McCarthy. I've made a start on this, and it's kind of strange reading this one because I know exactly what happens, kind of like scene for scene, so it's quite an interesting experience. I've never had that before with a book where I know exactly what's going to happen, but it's still enjoyable, and I love the style of writing already. There's a really colloquial style of writing to it that's really cool. And then I also picked up the first book for Game of Thrones. Now, me and my girlfriend have been re-watching Game of Thrones, and I've been really enjoying it a lot more than the first time because I think there was just such an unbelievable amount of hype the first time that it came around that it just kind of made it a bit annoying for me in a way. I still watched it, but yeah, I just thought the hype was just ridiculous. So watching it again years later without all that going on and without having to avoid Twitter every weekend, that's been really good, and then it really made me want to read the books as well. So I've picked up the first book. I haven't started this one yet, obviously I'm reading the other one first. But yeah, I'm looking forward to reading this and seeing what it's like compared to the series, because I've heard there's quite a few differences. So yeah, first book of that. It's a big one, but yeah, I'll get onto that one after I've read the first one. So if any of you guys like reading, I'd love to hear about that. Maybe let me know which book you're reading at the moment. Okay, so that's the general chit chat out the way. Let's get talking about beat making and machines and samplers. And today I'm going to be on the SP404 Mark II because I came across this technique which I've always wanted to kind of use in a beat, and I finally was able to use it and execute it nicely as well. So I want to jump on the machine and show you guys that. Now, there's loads of different sort of old school techniques that are still floating about in the beat making world. Some of them are just classics that you use all the time. Things like 16 levels on the MPC on your hi-hat to give them a nice humanized feel. That's like a classic technique. Use an isolator to isolate certain sounds out of samples so that you just get the bits that you want. That's a really good technique as well. This one is kind of like stem separation, but without having to use AI. So let's jump onto the machine. I'm going to show you what I did, and it's definitely something you guys should listen out for because this was incredibly useful for the beat that I was making, and it cleaned things up a lot. Okay, so here we are at the machine. This is the best camera angle I can sort of do with this new setup, but it should be okay for what I'm going to show you here. So I had this sample and I started chopping it up, and the first thing that I realized was that the drums in this track were pretty heavy. So if I show you these chops that I've got. Got to be your lover. You should be able to hear quite obviously there that there's a heavy amount of drums in this sample, which obviously when we're trying to chop samples and make beats and put our own drums on the top, we don't really want that because it can clash. And that's the problem that I got into making this beat, is that my own drums that I was laying over the top were clashing with the drums that are in the chops on this record. Got to be your lover. You could kind of hear there that I can sort of mask them a little bit, but it wasn't as clean sounding as I would like. So I started really listening to the sample, and I noticed that the drums are very heavily panned to the right hand side. So see if you can hear that in your ears. If I play this chop, you should be able to hear that a lot of the drums are in the right hand ear. If you're using headphones, you should really easily be able to hear that. So that got me thinking, well, why don't I pan the sample so that those drums aren't in it anymore? And you can do this with the SP404 Mark II really easily. I'm sure you can probably do this with other samplers as well. You can certainly do this with the MPCs. You can choose which side of the sample you want to sample in, left or right. So I'm going to go ahead and pan this to the left because the drums are in the right hand side. So if I pan it to the left, hopefully a lot of the drums should disappear. So I'm going to do this to all of them at the same time. I think you can do this by holding copy. So copy, shift, and you can see now that pan is showing on the screen here. Hopefully it says pan center, and I'm going to use the right hand dial and just go all the way to the left. And you can see now it's changed to say mono and brackets left. So we've panned the sample entirely to the left and made it only play the left-hand side of the sample. Now, obviously, you lose the stereo aspect of it, but it's a really useful technique because if you can hear now, all the drums have basically disappeared. You can hear some very light hi-hats in the background. Now, with my own drums, I'll easily be able to mask that out. So if we play that again, just loosely, I'll finger drum along. And there we go, that is sounding a lot better. That is sounding much cleaner. I'm not getting those clashes with my drums. So this is something you should definitely try when you're sampling a record and finding that your drums are clashing. Listen in your headphones and see if you can hear any hard panning, because if you pan to one side or the other, you can remove certain elements of those samples to your advantage. Like I say, it's kind of like stem separation, but you're actually doing it manually, and it's much more rewarding than using stem separation anyway. So I do have to be honest, when I first used that technique on that beat, I felt like I'd evolved to a sort of god status with sampling, just because it seems to be more towards the advanced side of sampling. So yeah, it's a really, really cool technique, but it's pretty damn simple to use thanks to that feature on the SP404 Mark II. And like I mentioned, I'm sure other samplers that you own will also have this feature as well. Definitely give it a try. The example that I showed you is obviously really good for removing drums, but it's also really good for other things as well. For example, you could do the opposite and use it to grab the drums from a track, chop those up and use them in your own beats. You could also use it to grab isolated instruments from records and then layer those over the top of your beats. So for example, there could be like a guitar lick or a bit of piano that's really hard panned, and if you use that technique, then you'll be able to grab that sound in isolation. If I could offer up one band that would be really good to sample and use this technique, it's definitely the Beatles. Now the Beatles hard pan stuff all the time in their records from like the 60s and 70s. They were pretty experimental with their sounds, and I guess this was kind of a technique that was at the forefront of technology at the time. So in particular, I think the White Album would be really good for this. Have a listen to that. See if you can take the left or right hand side of a record and see what sounds you get from the Beatles. I'm sure you'll be able to either extract the drums from Ringo or some kind of isolated instrument that you'll be able to layer on your beat.